I have been through a couple harrowing experiences here, and Watch Duty was born out of pain and frustration that many of us experience here in the North Bay and across the West. We set out to not just build the disaster platform for wildfire, but to build it for all natural disasters, starting with wildfires. We decided to start with the hardest one first because, well, why not? So the situation today, have any of you experienced a wildfire close by chance? That's about half the room, unfortunately. So the situation today, if you've ever been through it, is there's just data sources everywhere. The CAL FIRE website and Nixle notifications are not enough and leave a lot to be desired. And turns out that problem exists inside the government as well, which I will go into shortly. But you don't really know where to go, and there's also different platforms. So in a mutual aid scenario, when there's an incident command post, you have Cal OES and CAL FIRE, and you have people from Utah and Idaho and folks from all over who are all trying to fight the same fire. And unfortunately, they do not have access to the same intelligence. So this creates a lot of dangerous situations, which leads to inconsistent intelligence. And then what we've really narrowed in on is shared situational awareness. We all have the same idea of the same event as it happens. So we liken what we do to sports reporting, where whether it's ABC, NBC, or CBS on the radio, they all say the same thing. So-and-so steps up to the plate, ball's hit to the outfield, caught out by so-and-so, thrown out at second. And there's no debate. There's no misinformation. There's no, he did a backflip on the way there. Everyone knows the same thing, right? And that is what keeps people safe, including the fire service themselves. So what is Watch Duty? For those who don't know, we are the definitive platform for all this intelligence, all collapsed into one place. It is free to use. It's a nonprofit organization. There's no sign up, no email, no phone number, no text message, no tracking, no nothing, which is like fighting with a hand behind our back because we can't track you and then target you for things. But that's not really what we're here for, right? We're the app that you want in your pocket, but you never want to use. And that is very much core to our ethos and how we build our application itself. So I have 12 minutes left. Great. I'm going to try and do this as quickly as I can. So Zach wanted me to talk about my story and to getting to Sonoma County and how this all happened. And so in 2019, I bought a ranch in northern Sonoma County outside of Healdsburg, off the grid in the woods. I've been living in California for 16 years at the time. Now it's 20 years. And I decided for another challenge. So I make my own power, my own water, my own infrastructure. I have no poles or anything that's bringing anything to me outside of my Starlink internet connection. About 1 month after I moved there, well, I was not really moved there yet. This is pre-pandemic. We'll get to that part of the story. But pre-pandemic, I'm there like a month after, and all of a sudden helicopters start circling over my house. I smell nothing because fire burns uphill. I hear nothing except for the rotor wash of the helicopters. I have no alert. There's nothing on the news, and I don't know what is going on. Once the other helicopter shows up with a bucket on the bottom, that's when I realized that there was a fire very close by, and I stupidly grabbed my hose and just start watering my house down rather than running. We'll get into that later. But this was my first foray into this. Now, the helicopter's clear, a C-130 flies over my house, and I watch the bomb bay doors open and retardant fly on a hill above me, and that's when I knew it was really close. The odd thing about it is that when the air cleared, there was no one there but one engine. I drove up there was no noise, no nothing, and nothing in the news, and that's when I realized I was really in for a serious firefight for the rest of my life living here in Sonoma County. So right after that, the pandemic happened, and I accidentally moved to Sonoma and haven't left since. It was a very fortuitous event. And then I started building sprinkler systems, doing advanced home hardening, building bigger water cisterns, and really getting ready for the inevitable that I knew was going to come and will be back for me again at some point, which happened in August of 2020. You guys remember the red sky day when you were stuck inside from the pandemic, and then unfortunately, the sky was completely red, and Santa Cruz was on fire, Wine Country was on fire, and Mendocino was on fire at the same time. And that was the first time that I evacuated from a fire. I spent 7 days up all night trying to research wildland firefighting, where the information was, how this worked, and really I ended up finding the best information on Facebook and Twitter, oddly enough, through all the misinformation and noise, were a bunch of really intrepid citizens who would listen to fire service radios day and night all the time, 24 hours a day, and they'd be putting that information out on the internet. And that's where I really started to think about what this idea was. But in September of 2020, I think a day after I came back, I joined the wildland firefight. That's me pretending to be a firefighter in a kid's truck. I took wildland fire training. I was riding in fire trucks, working with my county officials, trying to understand how I was going to get involved and help this solution. March of 2021, I was in the Emergency Operations Center in Sonoma County, and it hit me like a ton of bricks that these people were not going to solve this problem, nor do they actually want my help. That has changed, but it took quite some time. The status quo doesn't like being challenged. I'm sure many of you disruptors know that, a term that I don't use very lightly. As my team knows me, I think that term is overused, but there are sometimes that industries need to be completely taken apart and put back together. And so it hit me then. In March of 2021, May of 2021, 4 years and 2 days ago, I found those radio operators and I convinced them to join me, and I was going to build this application that was going to change the world and the emergency management system as we know it. 80 days later, with very little sleep, I wrote most of the code myself with the help of a lot of my friends through Silicon Valley days, and we launched Watch Duty, and the rest was history, and it blew up very quickly after that. You can find me at lunch if you want to talk about go-to-market and how we did this and became the #1 app, but we have to move because I have 8 minutes left. So nothing like a fire to get you moving. So some of these reporters are regular citizens. Some are retired firefighters, some are 30, 40-year veterans, some of them are old CSP dispatchers. These are people who have a lot of experience listening to radio scanners and working within the government itself. And then some of them, like the New Zealand fire scanner on the left, he is a young 30-year-old man, never left his island, and he is the most famous radio operator in the world. It's an interesting bunch of people who really spend a lot of love and attention to keep you all safe from the edges of the world, who are guiding you to safety in the middle of the night through some of the most harrowing experiences that most humans will ever experience. So let's talk about how this strange thing works. So really, it's an amalgamation of people and machines. I know there's a lot of AI people in the room, but starting with AI is not always the answer. A lot of times it's empowering humans to do what they do better. And we'll talk briefly about that today. But essentially what happens is that there's a bunch of signals that come out of government systems, whether it's a dispatch for fire. Those are some names you probably don't know on the screen there, but there are government services that attempt to do this, and they give you a signal, but not enough of the story afterwards. And so what it does is it allows us to then say, hey, there's a veg fire here, turn on your radios, or listen remotely on the internet. That's how the New Zealand fire scanner does his job. And there's a lot of wildfire cameras. There's about 1,500 wildfire cameras throughout the West. A lot of them are in California. And so we start listening in real time. It all comes into Slack. So all these signals and all this intelligence comes into Slack, and then it triggers the humans to start listening. And they start coordinating in real time and thinking about, what does this mean? Are the structures threatened? How fast is it going? And we can hear the first responders talking to each other. That is the only source of data that is remotely real time, and that's why we had to do it this way, because there was really no other solution, right? Obviously, you'd want to use machines and AI, but there just isn't a clean signal, so you can't use AI on dirty data. So once we validate that information, someone will take the control of the incident and then start posting information in Watch Duty, which ends up push notifying your phones. So we also enrich that data with all sorts of other things, satellites and wind and flight tracking, and we're adding constantly more features and layers. A lot are coming out this summer, which I cannot talk about yet, but they are going to blow your mind. It's amazing to watch Silicon Valley come to our rescue, whether it's Google, Apple, Facebook, and the Mag 7 is coming with money and resources to help us. And so it's going to look a lot different. Well, look similarly, but feel a little different. Because it's going to get even more interesting and more eyes on the disaster as it unfolds. But it gets stranger. I only have 5 minutes left, so let's see if I can get through this. it gets weirder because if you start digging around the radio system, you realize there's dead zones across the West. And so we built radio boxes that actually get hosted on fire departments, land, and other private landowners that give us ears out in the middle of nowhere so we can hear the first responders talk. And the irony of this whole thing is that they listen to these radios as well, which we did not realize just how fragile the system was. But let's get to the end of my speech here. What's been really fascinating is that by doing what we did for the residents of the West, we didn't understand that the fire service was also using this as well. This man became an advisor of ours. He's one of the most famous firefighters in California, and we keep getting emails from people like him, like the Fire Administrator of America, tanker pilots, dozer operators. Everybody is using it. It has become the way that the government is also tracking this information. And all of a sudden, you see sheriffs, fire departments, governments, we're in papers, we're in the news, we're running other government websites for them. And then we became the #1 app in the App Store for the third time nationwide. And this was all because of the LA firestorm that you're all very familiar with. So the LA wildfires are reminiscent of what happened in the Tubbs fire in 2017. It was a huge amount of structural loss and loss of life. Second most deadly fire, 29 people killed. I'm not going to read all this, but the government was unable to keep up with the amount of traffic that was coming at them. So their systems started to crash. Emergency alerts were sent erroneously. And then I got a senator sent me this photograph. And he says, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then you win. But this doesn't feel like winning to me. This feels like abject failure of the infrastructure of our government, the software companies who were trying to help, and the whole system. This is a $99 piece of software. We have an upgraded version you can buy that is now running the second largest emergency operations center in America during the worst fires they've ever seen. So although I am proud, I am also worried for our future if this is the bar that we're raising here. So let's talk about what happened for us as Watch Duty. Again, we're the #1 app. Again, proud, but also upset that that is the reality of this event. We onboarded 2.5 million new users in about a week and a half or 2 weeks. We sent 1/3 of a billion push notifications, and we were topping out at 100,000 requests a second, which is twice Wikipedia and more than the government can handle themselves. To about 2 million active users an hour. We had 0 downtime the entire event. We were sleeping in shifts and making every phone call we could to our friends at the Mag 7 to keep our infrastructure up while the world was burning. And the most important part is we didn't send any false alerts like what happened in LA 3 times at random hours of the night. And very little sleep, I think I mentioned that. So let's talk about the nonprofit organization. I have 2 minutes left. This is the fun part for me, is that doing this way has been a fun challenge and it's the right thing to do. No one should own this, not even us. And it's important that it's owned by the people and built for the people. So you see a lot of other self-sufficient nonprofits that actually are doing quite well in billions of revenue. It's just not very well known in the States. AARP and AAA are actually multi-billion-dollar nonprofits that people don't seem to be very aware of, but it's a very effective way to run business if you have the outcomes and goals that we desire. And so what's interesting about us, similar to AARP, is we're almost self-sufficient. We're scaling up more now, so it's red, black, as you're all familiar with your fundraising rounds. But it's important for us to stand on our own 2 feet. Last year, 80% of our budget was actually funded by annual people who were spending $25 a year and getting extra services in the app. And we take grants similar to how an organization would take venture funding, right? We take that for growth, not for operations. And so that's how we continue to up level over and over and over again. Google just gave us $2 million last year, and a lot of donors have been showing up to help support us as well. So you can see the income by the numbers. We're doing about 4x growth. As you're all aware, triple, double is the goal in Silicon Valley, and we're quadrupling over and over again. We'll see if that happens again this year, but it is our goal to prove another model and way to run an enterprise that helps humanity and our community. Our overhead is also very low for you guys who run SaaS companies. ignoring AI, your margins are very good, about 80–85% if you're any good at it. Our overhead last year was only 4%. Most nonprofits are 20–35. And what's also interesting about software is the dollar efficiency amount, right? $1 supports 3 mobile users. And every dollar you put in supports a very, very large amount of weight, which is the beautiful part about software and applying that to a nonprofit concept. So I'm over time here, but what is next is a very large set. Let me put them all up here. We're adding a lot more features for fire. We're selling to governments as well, business to business, business to government. Very large sales are coming our way, which is wonderful. We're only in 22 states. We have to get to 50. And then finally, we're going to start expanding into floods, earthquakes, tsunamis, and other disasters that are plaguing our community. And then finally, we are building a preparedness hub and a better way to figure out how to do home hardening and what the information actually looks like and the truth, because the truth is not out there, unfortunately. Thank you all. Appreciate your time.